So when the Mongols attacked the Song dynasty, they first experienced their connection to gunpowder, which they are going to eventually help get all the way to Europe through the Silk Roads and trade and all of that type of stuff. But whenever they did that, they were using these very not evolved weapons that were they're called fire lances. Okay, so if you're looking over here, you can see if you can see my mouse on the over here. The 13th to 17th century, this is what a fire lance looked like. Basically, what they would do is they would jam down gunpowder in a wad and all that type of stuff, and they just kind of held the pipe in the direction of where they wanted to fire, and they would light it on fire and shoot it. And so that's kind of how that played out. But they weren't very accurate, as you can tell. The barrel's not really that long, and they just really weren't. They weren't very accurate. They didn't have anything to hold on to, and so there's a lot more to it than that. But the top picture right down here is a fire lance that the Song dynasty would have actually fought against the Mongols with. Again, they weren't very accurate. They relied mostly on having a bunch of them to shoot at one time and just hope that the scatter effect of all the different shots would take out a lot of Mongols. It did later. The guns did later evolve in Asia and in Europe, and they evolved into handguns and into cannons. You can see a couple of examples below the fire lance down there on the bottom picture. Those are a couple of different handguns that they would have used, and they're not handguns like what you're using today or what you're looking at today. They're very long. They're almost more of a long rifle, is what they look more like. But they were more accurate and they were more helpful. By the 14th century, foreigners that were employed by the Mongols actually brought gunpowder from one end of the empire to the other end of the empire, and they were able to get that that gunpowder all the way to Europe, and the Europeans then improved upon its use, and that's pretty much how that played out. So that's how Europe got guns, and that's how Europe actually began to get better guns, is by connecting with them and looking at it and seeing improvements that they could make. You got to think during this time, or really shortly thereafter. It's also what we're fixing to talk about, the Renaissance. The Renaissance is like a rebirth of learning. And so these people took those Renaissance ideas, and just like everything else we're going to talk about in history from here through the end of it, what most of the time advances technology is warfare. Most of the time, there's huge advancements in technology during warfare. So you can see how having a gun would just be a game changer for people who are running around in metal plate armor that's not going to stop a bullet, and how it kind of made a more of an even playing field for everybody, not just rich people, because it wasn't super hard to get or make a gun at that point. So this right here is a really big deal. This is cultural diffusion at its finest.